Let's play a quick word association game, shall we? What comes to mind when I say the word feminist? Investigative journalist? How about traveling around the world in less than 80 days? I would be so surprised if any of you thought of Nellie Bly. Women matter. Journalists matter. Nellie Bly knew both of these things, and she believed in equal opportunity. Though she was born in 1864, Bly's passion for justice can still be felt in the air today. I will be giving you all a window today into Nellie Bly's life and legacy. First, by discussing her feminist approach to journalism, then by explaining her accomplishments as America's first investigative journalist, and finally by detailing her contributions to the world we live in today. Bly was born as Elizabeth Jane Cochran, and later took on the pen name Nellie Bly when she was hired as a reporter at the age of 18 by the Pittsburgh Dispatch. However, Bly was not seeking a job when she was hired. In fact, quite the opposite. She approached the Dispatch to voice her anger at an editorial they published that framed women as weak and unworthy. However, according to Biography.com's entry on Bly, the managing editor for the publication was so impressed by Bly's passion that they hired her on the spot, $5 a week to be a columnist for them. Bly accepted the job and intuitively integrated her feminist perspective of the world into her gig from the start. Bly was way ahead of her time. After all, the women's suffrage movement wouldn't even start for 3 decades, and here she was publicly calling out sexist ideologies. At one point in her career with the Dispatch, Bly received backlash from factory owners for an article she wrote about the mistreatment of their female employees, and the Pittsburgh Dispatch responded by assigning Bly strictly to women's fashion and society columns. Well, Bly was not happy about this, and also according to the writers at Biography.com, this led her to quit working for them after just 2 years, and led her to go find a career that offered her the freedom to address anyone she wished. And even as the barriers of misogyny tried to stand in her way, Nellie Bly remained determined to make a name for herself, not just to gain fame, but also to debunk the myth that women were not capable of professional success. Nonetheless, like the majority of women during her time, Bly struggled to find work. But she went out on a limb anyway and pitched a story about immigrant experiences in America to the New York World in 1887. While her pitch was declined by the publication, an editor instead assigned her to investigate life on Blackwell Island's Women's Lunatic Asylum. A mouthful, I know, but it was a notorious mental institution during the 19th century. Not only did Bly accept the assignment, she decided to take it a step further than expected of her. She feigned mental illness, gained admission to the facility, and exposed the heinous treatment of patients on the Blackwell grounds. After 10 days, Bly was released, and the New York World decided to publish her articles in a 6-page series called 10 Days in a Madhouse. Bly's expose made nationwide headlines and eventually led to significant reforms of New York's asylums. That's according to an article published by the media company Irish Central, entitled The Irish-American Journalist Who Faked Her Way into an Insane Asylum. Bly's groundbreaking reporting did not stop with her stay at the asylum, though. She investigated corruption in state legislatures, abuse of women by male police officers, and even helped get the messages of suffragists like Susan B. Anthony out to the public. Well, eager to break even more boundaries and disrupt even more gendered stereotypes, Bly decided to travel around the world with intentions to break the fictional record of Phineas Fogg, the male character of Jules Verne's novel Around the World in 80 Days. She got her trim sponsored by the New York World and completed her trip in 72 days. She set a real-world record, and her name reached international heights, according to Dr. Arlisha R. Norwood in her article for the National Women's History Museum. The fact that a woman could do something so strenuous and so independent of male assistance, it was unprecedented during that time, but not anymore. After taking a brief step back from reporting, Bly continued to make strides as a career woman and a reformist, and inevitably found her way back to the world of journalism. For more context on that, in 1895, Bly married a millionaire named Robert Seaman and stopped reporting. But after her husband died just 8 years later, she took over his manufacturing company and went on to patent several of her own inventions. Just like that, Bly found herself breaking yet another societal boundary. She was a woman industrialist in a country that still treated men as superior. In addition to inventing, she reformed the company's policies and supplied her employers with things like health care and fitness gyms. These heavy reforms came at a cost, though, and soon her finances began to dwindle. As a result, she re-entered reporting in 1920 at the New York Evening Journal, right around the time that the women's suffrage movement began. Bly died of pneumonia at the age of 57 in New York City. The New York Evening Journal published a tribute column the day after her death, wherein one of her editors deemed her, quote, the best reporter in America. That's according to journalist Brooke Kroger in her entry about Bly for the American National Biography. Needless to say, Bly's dedication to her craft was evident from her teenage years up until her dying days, and she ultimately achieved her goal to make a lasting contribution in the world. Though many of you may not have heard the name Nellie Bly before, hopefully you will remember her now. Bly's achievements undoubtedly paved the way for female journalists like myself, for working class people, and for a generation of men who recognized the need for gender equality. Nellie Bly was a progressive feminist before it was trendy to call yourself that. These days, you see titles like self-proclaimed feminist in people's Instagram bios and article headlines, but back in the 1800s, people were persecuted for their forward-thinking identifiers. With this in mind, Bly's unwavering dedication to fame, feminism, and freedom from societal restrictions set a standard for centuries to come. Society still has a lot of work to do, but we can thank Nellie Bly for taking the first steps down a very long road to a more leveled playing field.